it's also important to think that since it's only going to happen one time in your life, it might just be worth it to spend $5,000-$6,000 more between all the extra vendors to make sure that they're of high quality and that you're going to get the results that you actually want.
Welcome to the Before You Say I Do podcast. This podcast helps wedding couples learn industry secrets about the wedding industry and the various wedding vendors in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia areas. My name is Joshua Buxton, and I am your host. With over 7 years as a professional wedding videographer, I have filmed many weddings all over the United States and hope to help wedding couples find the right vendors before they say I do. Welcome to Before You Say I Do podcast. I'm Joshua Buxton with Buxton Media Productions. And today we have Sebastian here again today as our wedding videographer. And today we're going to talk about the tips and misconceptions of wedding videography and the wedding industry as a whole. Sebastian, welcome back again.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It hasn't been too long.
It hasn't been too long, no. We've been really busy at it. We just finished a wedding expo yesterday, actually, in Baltimore. We've met a lot of really great couples there, and so it's kind of fitting that we're going to get to talk about this because I feel like we talked about these same things yesterday at that wedding expo,
true.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the very first thing, we kind of like created a list of some things that we could talk about, but the very first one is, the fact that wedding couples try to plan their own wedding day and they don't have a coordinator or day of coordinator, but they're just trying to do it all themselves. Can we talk a little bit about, probably the tips that we can explain to why maybe that's not such a great idea?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, anytime I've worked a wedding, I think the person that keeps everything in line and in check is a wedding coordinator.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I think if you want to be able to experience your day in full and experience all the emotions and the special moments, you have to be present. And when you're delegating tasks and things to do and calling a vendor who's not here yet and all that kind of stuff, it really takes you away from it. So I think I would start there, that you want to experience your wedding, and with a wedding coordinator, you're able to do that.
Yeah, I can definitely remember a couple of weddings, especially people I've known that have tried their hand at coordinating their own wedding. And it was manageable by all means. One of them was a really good friend of mine. And I decided to do videography for the wedding as kind of a gift, but I felt like I was kind of playing the role of wedding coordinator for that wedding just because I've learned so much from all the weddings I filmed that, maybe we should do it this way. Let's plan this way. Let's look at your schedule. Let's, trying to help them out. And they were just, they're trying to do it all because I get it. They have a budget and they're trying to be very budget conscious, but the day of their wedding, they're just so stressed out because there's so many little things that, they've never planned a wedding before. And there's so many little things that usually go on behind the scenes of a successful wedding that a wedding coordinator or wedding vendors will definitely catch and be able to look out for and plan and prepare around than a wedding couple will ever do, because for them, the wedding couple, this is their first wedding they've ever had to plan if they plan it themselves. And so there's a lot of lessons learned that a lot of wedding coordinators, I feel like they fix on their end and get better over time, just like wedding videography, photography, we all get better because the more weddings we do. But that is a huge thing that I know if you're able to save money, let's find some other ways to do it, because there's some really good wedding coordinators out there, day of coordinators that, it's worth the money to have somebody there to think of those things that you don't have to think about. So that's a huge tip, I think, that we can give to wedding couples.
Definitely. And like you said, it really bleeds into every vendor there in general. And I think when you have a person that can oversee the entire production of your wedding day, then they're able to keep everything in check and you don't have to worry about those things, which allows you to have the time to actually experience your day, be able to be there for your first look and walking down the aisle, and you won't be thinking about, the caterer never got back to me before I walked down the aisle.
They're running late. It's like, what do we do after the ceremony if the food's not here yet?
Yeah. And also, I'll say this, it kind of touches on one of the other things we thought about talking about today, which was the DIY is always cheaper.
Right.
And with that is, maybe, you have a specific type of skill set that might provide you with some things you could do for your own wedding, but once again, there's so many logistics into planning a wedding that worrying about decorations yourself or worrying about, maybe your uncle or something doing your videography for you or something like that just to save some costs. I think in the moment it might sound good, but at the end of the day, you will see that shown on your wedding day. So if you planned your own wedding, you'll see the repercussions of doing that. And then same thing with having your uncle maybe do video. You might capture your ceremony, for example, but will it have professional audio? Will you actually be able to hear your vows? Will you have more than one camera angle? And then whoever set that up is also, if it is your uncle or something, they might not be enjoying the wedding as they could, So DIY is not always cheaper.
That's true. Yeah, I kind of equate that to, I do a lot of my own home renovations, and I'm a definite DIYer at home. And like a recent project, and this is very, I think a good way of relevancy. It's like, to think of it this way, is like, I got a quote for plumbing and in a bathroom remodel, and it was way higher than I ever expected to pay. And I was like, oh, I'll just do it myself. Like I could figure this out. And several weekends later, like I got it done and it looks good, but how many weekends did I lose trying to get that done? How many hours did I lose? And the fact that I find out a month later that something wasn't crimped right, and now I got a leak, and now I got to go back in and fix it because I didn't do it right. It's like, at a certain point, it is definitely worth it to hire the professional to do it right the first time. And with plumbing or things like that, at least you could hire somebody to come back out. Weddings, you can't do that.
True.
Like you get one chance to capture a wedding, whether it's photos or video. Now you don't get a do-over on that. So
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You're so right.
So like that's that's something I feel like a lot of wedding couples realize after the fact, especially when they do decide to get a wedding videographer, and then they see the results of a good professional video, they are flabbergasted that like that they even thought about not getting video.
Right.
And they're like, well, this was a last minute decision. We almost thought about not doing this. And then after the fact, they can't even imagine having not ever done it, And it's like, these are memories that, you got to think like, with photos, it's great because you can see still photos for a long time. But the things you don't get with photos are the actual speeches or actual moments of, your grandmother like dancing with your son or whatever, however it all works out. But there's a lot of moments that are captured through video that you just can't get with photos. And everybody's got their phone out trying to film it too, but how often do you actually get any of those files?
Right. And what's interesting is, it's ultimately it's different mediums, right? So you have music as just its own medium, and it's enjoyable to listen to music. And then there's music with music videos, and that's its own experience. Same thing with these moments. You have your photography, which freezes a moment in place, and, as we all say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And video is the same way, and it just delivers a different kind of thing that you can experience in a different kind of way. And that also brings us to one of our other points, that videography is just an extra cost.
Right.
And I think that's a big misconception, because we live in the most advanced technological age we have had ever, and with that comes having video at our disposal. And it's not just an extra cost, as we just explained. We're able to capture things in a way that photo and memories cannot, achieve. And
not even on top of that, and this is something I've talked about with other vendors, is with video, like we're capturing things that nobody knew was going on. Like when you're getting ready, if you're the bride, you have no idea what the groom is doing to get ready, but it might be cool to be able to see some of those things. There might be moments that your dad was doing, that you never got to see because you were so focused on the ceremony and looking at your soon-to-be husband or wife, that you didn't see your dad over there crying his eyes out, or the mom bawling and like with tears of joy.
Of course.
Usually. But those are things that are, again, those are captured usually, and those are things that you wouldn't normally see because you didn't know they were happening. And those are things that, as good videographers, usually we're trying to capture those things.
Yeah. And I would say that on top of that, you also have more experienced videographers that understand how to capture even more moments and be able to also go unseen in a sense. Like we're fly
Right.
on the wall, as they say, you know, and I think there are videographers that don't understand and don't have or have developed the awareness to understand how to stand, where to stand, and also have the right equipment at their disposal, different lenses that allow you to be either further away and out of the action. That way,
Yeah.
maybe as a moment's happening, no one has to feel like, oh, I can tell that there's a camera pointing at me right now, you know?
Hmm.
So that's where all the experience comes in with all the videographers, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure with many other equipment too. Over the years, like I've learned to get better audio equipment, better lighting equipment,
Mm-hmm.
just because I found certain kinds of equipment actually are better fit for this job, than it would be anything else. But I think that's a really
Yeah.
good point.
With planning your wedding, there's obviously a lot of things to keep in mind. You have food, you have the venue,
Yeah.
you have your dress, all of the above, you know. And I think ultimately understanding that if you are going to hire a videographer, you need to set a certain type of mood for your reception, for example, so that there's enough lighting for the videographer. And I know that's, maybe something that comes as a second thought, but we have been in certain situations where maybe the bride and groom were like, we want a candlelit dinner. And
Hmm.
when we say candlelit, we do truly mean just candles on
Yep.
the table.
I've seen them.
For
Been there,
sure.
filmed them. Yep.
And just like, your human eye can't, create more light out of thin air, it's very hard to push our cameras to a point where the footage at that light level is usable. It's just very hard to do that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I think one thing, and maybe this would be a tip, is that, if you are trying to go as a couple, go for that lower lit reception, dance, feel, however it is go ahead and have that talk with the videographer. And they may try to explain to you, like, okay, can you just give me 30 minutes at a reception? Like, I'm just going to light speeches, dances, the special dances with this lighting, and maybe 30 minutes of like the high energy lighting with the DJ or band, and then I'll turn everything off so you can get that, that feel that you really want. But understand, like, if you are going to refuse the videographer to have some kind of lighting up, the quality of your video is going to degrade significantly, and it's not going to look good. It really looks bad. And with low light, it brings in what we call noise,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this noise it'll be very relevant as soon as the videographer in post-production starts bringing up the exposure, and it
Mm-hmm.
just looks absolutely terrible in my
Yeah.
opinion. But that is something, like, to have that talk with that videographer ahead of time, and like, hey, this is the feel. We're going to do candlelit. What kind of lighting are you going to do? Can we limit it to this, and this, just so that you get the shots you need, and then we like it, down to candlelight if we can. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good balance to have, and I think the videographers will definitely understand it. We would totally understand that. I try to work with all the wedding couples about our expectations for lighting, and a lot of times we don't know what we're going to deal with until we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always bring extra lighting just in case, but we want to make sure that we give our couples the best product possible. And 9 times out of 10, it requires some kind of lighting at
Mhm.
some point in the wedding.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is, photographers, they're able to get away with it with using flash, which is great
Right.
for still photography. So you kind of have to factor that in, right? That the photographers are to give you those results that you want. Those photographers are using extra lights. You just perceive them a little differently because
Right,
they're
right.
flashes, right? But I would actually say that from talking to a lot of photographers about lighting in general, I've seen it happen a lot more that they're like, oh, do you have video lights?
Yes.
They
Yep.
love it,
Yeah, they do.
which makes, they can turn off their flashes, or they could use their flashes in combination with the lights that we
Right.
have. So ultimately, I think, lighting is just important. And I think that's the tip. And I think finding the compromise with your videographer if you want a specific mood, is going to be in your best interest. That way everyone knows what the game plan is. And I think that's where a wedding coordinator also comes in play, is they can oversee everything and make sure that everyone is staying within the parameters that we've set.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the flexibility and, the day for wedding couples. Can we expand upon like why we need that flexibility?
Definitely. I think having a big expectation of what your day is supposed to go like is good as a rule of thumb, but ultimately I think you have to allow that room for flexibility. And, I think that kind of bleeds into everyday life. We have expectations about our jobs, about people, and I think having expectations of your wedding day is great. Maybe you've planned it phenomenally, but hey, maybe it's going to rain, or maybe something happened with the shuttle and it didn't make it to pick up your guest in time. So that's where being able to just breathe through it and understand that it's all going to work out. And it always does, right?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's where having a wedding planner too, they will make sure they take care of you the whole day.
Yeah, I think usually, and we've had guests on here before, and I think it was Katie. We talked about having a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and wedding coordinators do that. They will have all of those contingencies for rain. What happens if the shuttle's late? What happens if, the cake is late, the food is late? What happens if the power goes out? What are those contingencies? That's where you lean on your wedding vendors to help you work through that. Like, I don't think it always should be the problem and concern of the wedding couples, because if you hire good vendors, they're going to take care of it anyways, but it is important that, not every schedule is going to be set in stone. There is a lot of flexibility. I don't think I've ever had a wedding that went literally according to plan, minute by minute.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been some kind of flex for one reason or another, whether it's, hey, the sun is setting early because the clouds are coming in. We still want to get the golden hour, to go get some photos and video. Or, hey, we're going to wait for this rain cloud to pass by, and then we're going to go out there and set up for ceremony. So we're like 30 minutes behind. Those things happen,
Or it might even be that you would like to change something,
right,
because you're like, I'd rather get family photos done all now. That way we can join the cocktail hour.
Yeah.
Things
Absolutely.
like that. So, I think as vendors, we're always happy to be flexible when in regards to your wedding day. And I think allowing yourself to also have that flexibility just creates a very fluid environment. And then we're all on the same team.
Yeah. So kind of back on, on that topic of, scheduling and allowing for flexibility, something that is important that I make sure that wedding couples try to incorporate into their schedule is more what we call buffer time, to allow for time for photos that are before the ceremony or photos after the ceremony. One thing that usually tends to hold a lot of things up or push things really back is family photos. That's a huge one where we think it's going to be done in 30 minutes. We think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that it usually takes 45 minutes to an hour, because usually after the ceremony, the family disperses out immediately. And then everybody's got to go find the family members and pull them back in. And then getting, the coordination of this family's got to go up, you go sit down, you go do this. And it's like, if we had more flexibility and buffer time, for things like that, then I think good things go a little bit more smoother with that. But, buffer time is, I wish more schedules allowed for just a little bit more extra wiggle room for the flexibility of things, but this buffer time is very important so things don't keep pushed back,
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
It is. And I could give you a very good scenario. So imagine this. You're at your wedding day, right? And you are supposed to have first look at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
And you were putting on your dress and one of the buttons broke.
It's literally happened in one of my weddings before.
I've seen it happen, yeah.
I've had to help the bride with the button before.
So check this out. If you've allowed for enough time before your ceremony, because first looks usually happen before ceremonies, of course. So, if you had enough buffer time set in place, then you can get that button fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is calm because they still had the time. So that's like one small scenario. in which that can happen. Or let's say that maybe the DJ is late, you know? So if you had enough time in place, then your cocktail hour can still begin at the right time and your guests are able to enjoy it and you're able to have all your festivities.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about a misconception. And this is something we kind of deal with when we're actually, in these inquiry calls with wedding couples. And it's this idea of what we call raw files. And,
Oh.
wedding couples are like, hey, do you offer raw footage? And a lot of times what we realize is that wedding couples have a different idea what raw files are versus what we do in the video world. There's definitely a difference of what they think is raw and what we think is raw. Can you help expand upon, what it is that raw really means?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is as videography has developed over the years, there's more formats that have come out for cameras to be able to record in very specific profiles. And these profiles ultimately allow us as videographers to have access to whether it's more exposure or more dynamic range. And dynamic range is basically, how much of the brightest points and how much of the darkest and mid points your camera can capture at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And these formats allow us to capture your day in that way, but when you view these files on the computer, when you literally get them right off the camera, they don't look like your normal video.
No, very gray, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that it's just like, where's all the color in this?
Yeah. It's like if life had no color.
Yeah, it's like if you're almost colorblind, but you can kind of see a little bit. It's very gray.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like everything is what we call compressed at the time. And what we do is we pull it back out. And that's where the contrast and the colors and everything comes back out of it. Yeah.
Right. And that's what's interesting, right? So back in the day, someone would be like, yeah, like film my wedding day and I just want the footage or, put it on a DVD and I just want to watch it like that, right? But with these new formats, we have to do somewhat of a conversion process between the raw file and then a file that you can enjoy.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where the misconception is there, that raw footage is simply just a file you can get right out of the camera. But with these newer formats, you need to be able to, change it to a file where you can see color now.
Mm-hmm.
And some computers might not even open the flat file that we're talking about either. You might need a very specific program and a professional, editing program to be able to view it.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, something that most people don't realize is when we're filming throughout the day, on average, a wedding video, like if we capture 8 hours in a day and we have 2 videographers, we will probably capture anywhere between 500 gigabytes to 800 gigabytes, because it's all raw, uncompressed files. And so like your wedding ceremony itself might be over 100 gigabytes when you add all the cameras together. And a lot of computers and a lot of TVs, they will not be able to actually process that because again sometimes we're filming in 4K. Some cameras nowadays are filming in 6K, 8K, and your computer or TV will definitely not be able to handle it. So it takes good professional editing software to be able to compress that file into a format that you could easily put it up on your TV or your iPad or your laptop and watch it without any problems or what we call rendering issues, where there's lag and things aren't really moving that fast. And so I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions when wedding couples ask us about raw files is like, can we give you raw? We offer that as a package, but what we will do is we'll take all the files and we will put it into a sequence through our editing software. And we will actually fix a lot of the exposure and the colors so that it doesn't look gray and it's not raw. But, we do a light color grade and a light exposure to everything so that everything still looks pleasant to the eye and looks like it should, But, it's still, and then we compress it. We compress it to where it's easily viewable, and it gives you the raw of like what you would have expected if you hit a VCR and like hit record and then popped
Right.
it out and gave it to somebody to watch it. It'd be the same concept
Mm-hmm.
essentially, right?
Yeah. I definitely think it's wise for couples to get their raw footage at some point from their videographer. You just have to check with them first because some of them might not offer that service. And if that's important to you, then you want to make sure that they provide that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know with us, we will hold on to the footage for a year before we go through our hard drives and start deleting a bunch of stuff. But we make sure that we reach out to couples about a year out because it's by that point it's a little bit more affordable. They're not
Mm-hmm.
trying to pay for a really expensive wedding, and we will give them one opportunity to purchase the raw files from us, and we'll send them a hard drive so that they at least get all the memories from that day, whether it was in their highlight or ceremony or not. They'll at least have it because at
Yeah.
some point your videographer is going to delete this stuff. Like even if they hold on to the hard drive for 10 years, at a certain point that hard drive's going to fail
Yeah.
and you still won't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something to definitely consider is like, if you want raw files, maybe you don't need it right away, but reach out to your videographer and ask them about it maybe 6 months after the wedding, because more likely you're going to pay for it. You're going to have to pay something
Mm-hmm.
for it. And maybe ask that videographer before you hire them, is that something I can purchase from you later?
Yeah.
Because maybe you're right. Like maybe some videographers, they just don't offer that because that is something like a lot of times, like maybe they're not happy with all the stuff that they captured. And to them, like that's a creative product for them. And they're trying to give you the best creative product possible. They don't want you to see all the mistakes that they made, or this was really shaky and I kind of caught this was out of focus. And there's reasons why they didn't use the
Yeah.
footage. But, I think it's still worth asking those questions, right?
Yeah. And I think that brings us to another point of that, sometimes we think that all wedding videos are the same. And
Yeah.
it really depends on what you want as a couple. So if you want to go for that slow, cinematic, timeless kind of wedding, then choosing the appropriate music that goes with that. Also, the theme of your wedding, it should somewhat give off that vibe as well. And I think we have to learn to ask for what we want. That way
Mhm.
we know what to expect from a final deliverable.
Yeah.
And I thought about this because we're talking about raw files, and I think a way that people sometimes ask for that in addition to somewhat of a highlight video is a documentary edit.
Mm-hmm.
And we see those when couples are like, I don't want it to be too fancy. I just want to see my day in a very documentary style of way. And that's when us as shooters, when we know that we're doing that, we shoot in a very specific way to allow for moments to develop. And you might see 10 seconds before the big laugh happen and the hug, but now you understand the context of that
Right.
scene. And that's what's great about video. It's like we really are creating a movie just for you
Yeah, in one day, nonetheless.
in one day.
Yeah, like with documentary editing, that is, something it's definitely a style, and it's good to know if a couple wants that day because, thinking of gear as well, like, being experienced wedding videographers, if I'm going to film a documentary edit, I'm going to make sure that I have some kind of shotgun microphone on top of my camera so that I'm capturing authentic audio and not audio that's going into the camera itself, because I want it to be somewhat decent, or something as much as like, when we're capturing getting ready stuff, maybe we're like starting and stopping it like every 6-7 seconds. I would probably capture a lot longer
Oh, yeah.
to ensure that I'm not missing possible really great moments that I want to include in that documentary edit.
And I think I had an experience in the last, I think it's been in a wedding in the last like year and a half, and there was a lot more emphasis on shooting a lot more for this couple. And when I wasn't as used to that at that time, and I think as I was shooting throughout the day, I caught myself shooting completely differently as I would on a normal day, because when we know we want a highlight film, for example, which is some music and the best moments of the day, maybe a moment might not seem as important for that kind of end result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just doesn't look the same in that kind of edit. But when you're shooting these other kind of moments, there's a different intention behind it. And that's kind of what you're saying. Really being able to see a moment develop and shooting longer periods of time, which means it's also we need a lot more cards to shoot in 4K and for shoot
Yeah.
long periods of time, and that also takes up more hard drive space for us, and also culling for editing, which is when we sort through all your footage and we pick out all the best parts of your day. So all of those things kind of get affected if it is that you want more of a documentary edit. But having experienced videographers that can adapt to that is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, another one actually. Another one is that I think brides and grooms sometimes want to know if they can pick their own music, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of wedding couples will ask those questions like, "Can I use this Ed Sheeran, album or something?" I'm like, "Oh,
Well, hold
I
on.
wish you could."
Yeah. And here's why you can't, okay? So there's copyright in a lot of popular songs.
Mhm.
And I think, they're obviously amazing songs and I'm sure you want to use them, but usually what happens is that videographers and, companies in general have licensing deals with specific websites where they basically allow you to have licensing for very specific songs. So you pay a subscription and from there you can pick tons of songs monthly.
Right.
And I think if you want somewhat of a opinion on what you want the music to be for your highlight film, then it's good to communicate with your videographer and make sure that maybe they provide you with the website that they use to get these songs. And then from there, you can provide some options. Or I think my personal recommendation would be to allow the videographer to provide you with an option or two if you wish. And from there, you can help decide.
Yeah, music is such a big part of the video as just kind of anything with these highlight videos. A lot of times, like we are choosing music that fit with the vibe of the wedding day. Like if I feel like it's a very country wedding, I'm probably going to find more acoustical music that fit with that vibe. If I feel like it was a crazy party of a wedding day, I'll probably make the wedding highlight more energetic, which I'll find more energetic music that way. And with wedding videography, like we pay for subscription services to be able to use this music copyright free. That's not to say that, like, I know there's ways around certain things to be able to use music. I know reels and shorts and things like that, they've gotten away with it. It's definitely a different way of being able to accomplish that. And YouTube does allow for some things, but in general, it is technically illegal to use music that doesn't belong to you unless you pay a subscription service, which hopefully your videographer is paying a subscription service to some kind of music platform. We use Artlist. Artlist, if you're listening, maybe we can make this a sponsorship deal.
Sponsor us.
We use Artlist. We've been using it for the last several years. We've been using it, and I love the music that we get out of there. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of capabilities that we can use, some really good music that has been for that platform. There's a lot of other really good companies out there as well. But, music is definitely something that, I really feel like you should trust your videographer. Like you're hiring them for a reason, and hopefully you've seen some of their work. And
that's key.
If they've seen the work, then maybe they should trust that the videographer is going to come up with the right music, the right feel. Like that is something we are also really good at, is like being able to tell the story not just from dialogue and good shots, but like the music. The music is key.
Yeah. And I think one small tip to give would be to maybe if you don't feel comfortable picking the song out or getting too much into that, you can just at least tell them you would like it to be instrumental. Right. Or with lyrics. And I think that in itself is a very key thing that really determines how a video feels. So if you're not sure exactly what it is that you want, you could at least give them like one or two disclaimers or things that you want them to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And that usually helps round it out.
So this just kind of triggered my brain on some like a misconception too that has come up before, is that the wedding couple gets the highlight video with the song in it, and they come back to the videographer and go, "Can we just change the music out?" And you sit there and you cringe as a videographer and the editor. And it's not so much that you don't like the song that maybe they chose. It's the song will literally change the entire vibe of the video. Like there's a lot of cues and a lot of hit points that we try to make sure that happen within that one song to change it to a completely different song, especially completely different genres and different feel, will change the entire video.
Yeah.
And it does require a significant amount of more editing to be able to transfer it over. So I would just ask that couples really sit there and think, does this really need to change the song? Because the song, a lot of times, again, it's like it's well thought out. It's not like we just slap a song in there and like, this will work, whatever. Sometimes on some wedding highlights, it will take me hours to find the right song for that couple. Hours spent trying to find the right song, because I want to make sure that that song is going to fit the right mood. And I mean, I will literally just sift and sift and sift and sift, and then I might have my wife come in and be like, "What do you think about this song?" And she's like, "No, absolutely not." And I'll just sift and sift and sift again until I find the right song or right vibe. But that is like one big misconception, is that it's not an easy thing to just swap out songs. You will realize really quick if you try to do it that it completely changes the vibe of the video.
Definitely.
Oh man, so I've got a really big one, and it's really bad. It's picking your wedding venue space. So I'll take you back. This happened several years ago. It was my first ever and a really bad wedding. Good intentions, by all means, great intentions. They wanted to get married on the beach. And it was at a public beach, nonetheless, not a private beach. Very public.
Mm-hmm.
It was a ceremony. It was like 2:00 in the afternoon, hot on the sand, very coarse sand, so it was very hot. And it was a public beach on a weekend, and so you have this intimate moment, literally being watched by people without shirts on, walking around the sand as you're the bride's coming down. It's this magical moment. And then there's this gigantic family over here of, kids running around screaming and trying to play water sports or whatever on the beach. And you're literally just surrounded by all this, display, and everybody's watching. Everybody is watching. I couldn't help but laugh internally, and I'm like, I get it. Like, this couple thought they were going to get this magical beach moment, and they probably could have found somewhere that could have had more privacy, but this was public beach.
Wow.
And as a videographer, it was a pain. I hated it. It was I thought it was going to be magical too, because I was like, oh, we're going to get this beach wedding. It's going to be gorgeous. And it's it was 2:00 in the afternoon in the summer, and it was hot, and I couldn't wheel my cart out there with all my gear. And so I had to hand carry stuff all the way to the location. And it's it wasn't even close to where you could easily get to it. It was literally one of the worst weddings. Good intentions, really not as good as they were expecting out of it.
Yeah, and with that comes, also event spaces that are too small, and maybe you have too many guests,
Right. Yeah. And that's, I've had receptions, right, where you get into the reception space and the dance floor is the tiniest little thing possible. And to fit a photographer team and a videography team, all the cameras, the lights, it's you can't even get through the aisles for anything. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't think it through. So if you have a small venue space, make sure there's room for you to move around, especially for the dance floor. It's so just really be mindful of all those things. Again, comes back, wedding coordinators are going to love us for this, but highly pushing wedding coordinators, because they would probably see those things. They would probably see there's not enough room for the wedding party to come in now because the tables are too close to each other. Maybe it works when all the chairs are scooted into the tables, but the moment you get people to sit in those chairs, they scoot back, and they create the room that they need, and now there's no room to walk between them. And it's just those are things to be mindful of, venue spaces and how many people you have. Don't get married on a beach, on a public beach. Just don't do it. Trust me, you will have and I videotaped the whole thing. And so because I'm filming this couple, and they're like doing their vows, and behind them is like just like a bunch of like frat guys without their shirts on back there, like broing it
That's
up
not
over there.
romantic at all,
It's
is
not
it?
romantic
Yeah.
at all. It's like, and then everybody's staring at you, and it's just they're at the beach, they're relax and have fun, and here you are trying to get married, and
Yeah.
you've now instead of like 50 people at your wedding, you've got 300 people watching your wedding,
Yeah.
and it's just
Definitely.
that was like I don't think that they ever expected it to go that way, but just foresight for that one. Well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big tip is like be very mindful of your venue. Like, and I've seen it go completely opposite where it's like this beautiful mountainscape and it's like just absolutely stunning. Like
Yeah.
very private, absolutely stunning. I think like some of them, it's like great venue, but the parking was terrible. It's just like little things like that. All those things add up.
They
So.
do add up. And, I think the last thing that I can say in regards to this is that I think it ultimately comes down to budgeting. I think, obviously getting like a bigger ceremony space or reception space will cost more money so with that in mind, while budgeting is important for a wedding, it's also important to think that since it's only going to happen one time in your life, it might just be worth it to spend $5,000-$6,000 more between all the extra vendors to make sure that they're of high quality and that you're going to get the results that you actually want. And I think having the payoff of everything going truly the way that you would want on your wedding day outweighs that extra bit of cost that you can likely pay off, assuming general circumstances that you're able to pay off quickly.
Yeah.
Within a few years, you're like, oh, that extra bit for that more experienced videographer, that, that extra venue space or whatever it was, it will show and you'll be much happier.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely some ways that you could save money with all that stuff. At the expo yesterday, I was talking to one of the vendors and they were mentioning how you could save some money if you have a space, a venue really in mind that you really want to do. Like, consider getting married on a Tuesday. Like, you will get a much better deal. You'll save thousands of dollars. I guarantee it. Thousands of dollars on a wedding day, getting married on a weekday. Is it as convenient for your family and friends? Probably not. But, you could save so much more money doing it. I guarantee your family and friends are still going to show up.
They're going to show up.
They're going to be there.
Yeah.
If they really care about you, they'll be there. Maybe you'll find out who your real friends are.
Or if not, hit us up and we'll do a live stream of your wedding if they can't be there.
That's right. We do live streaming, so that's definitely something we can offer for sure. But yeah, like that's a tip. Like if you want to get the right venue and the right vendors for you, like consider doing a weekday wedding. That is something that I think a lot of people push aside. Like they've got to do it on a Friday or Saturday. It's like, but I guarantee you a venue is going to cut you a much better deal. Vendors will cut you a better deal because they're definitely looking for.
They need the work.
Yeah, they need the work on a weekday just as much as they do on a Saturday. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say that another important thing is to make sure that your videographer is on a similar, if not the same schedule as you and the photographer and all the other vendors. And I think generally speaking, I think if a videographer is experienced, they will be reaching out to you in regards to these things. But it's definitely important that you give them the itinerary for the day and that you're able to, that way they can have foresight of what's going to happen. So if first look with dad is happening 5 minutes before first look with your husband or your bride, then the videographer needs to know that as much as the photographer needs to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the sooner you can start to get all vendors on the same page for these schedules, the sooner you can probably troubleshoot some problem areas that your vendors are going to find. So if you're 2 months out, nothing's really set in stone, but the general ideas are there. Maybe you got it from your photographer, or you got it from the coordinator, and you send it to the videographer and they're like, actually, that's not going to work. Like, you have this first look at this location, and now you're giving me only 15 minutes to get to the ceremony, which is a 10-minute drive. Now I only have 5 minutes to set up. they're going to be able to troubleshoot all those problems. Like, could we push this first look 30 minutes sooner? Or maybe you have me start sooner. I'll go to the ceremony, go set everything up, come find you for the first look. Those are like things that if you're far enough out, you can troubleshoot and like move some things around. But as we all know, like when you're a week out from the wedding and you're just now finding out about this, or you're just now getting this information to a videographer or photography team, it's much harder to move things around when you're that close to the wedding day, because some people have really locked stuff in. You've got this space booked from this time to this time. Maybe you realize that you need to add an extra hour, but you didn't budget for that. And the videography team now, they're going to come later and, because you want them to stay later, or they leave sooner because now you need them sooner than you realize. So having that thought that like, okay, you've hired your videography team, maybe you're 6-7 months out, maybe do a touch point like, hey, how are we looking? I have a general idea of things. Can you just take a look at it? Like, where do you see some problem areas? And then the videography team should get back to you and say, you know what, actually you should do, maybe you should do bridal portraits and stuff immediately after your first look. So that gives you more time at cocktail hour. So like maybe you put your family portraits and stuff immediately after the ceremony. And, and these are the conversations that a good videographer will have with you. If you're this, and this is where it comes with experience, is like a non-experienced wedding videographer will probably like, yeah, that looks great. We'll just make it work,
Yeah.
And then the wedding day comes around and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have had more time. I wish we could have done this at this time. And they may make those suggestions to you on your wedding day. You're like, well, it's too late now. Like, this is it,
Yeah.
So having that time to be able to schedule those things out, those are important.
Super. Yeah.
So I think that really wraps us up on our tips and misconceptions for this podcast episode. If you actually have any questions or comments that you might have for your own wedding, maybe you found a videographer and they're not really meeting your expectations, or you wish you had some more insight of any questions you have, please leave a comment in our comment section. We'll be happy to answer those questions for you. If you're considering getting a wedding videographer, now's the time to start booking, especially for 2025. That's for sure. The good videographers go quick. That's for sure.
That's true. And I would actually like to add, speaking of 2025, we have a giveaway.
Oh, that's right. Let's talk about our giveaway.
We have a big giveaway in which if you follow the instructions on our Instagram channel, it's just 3 simple instructions. But if you follow those 3 instructions, you enter a chance to win one of our biggest packages. And that is for 2025.
Yeah, what we'll be doing is we'll gather all the information of the couples that like follow our Instagram page. They'll comment and share that post that's on there, as well as follow this and subscribe to this podcast right here. If they follow all those things, they'll enter in for a contest to win our platinum video package for 2025. We haven't fully set a date of when we're going to draw that yet, but it'll be sometime this year, and we'll definitely let those contestants know. And the great thing is, if you enter into this contest and you don't win, we will still offer you a 20% discount off of our packages for 2025, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so make sure to subscribe and like and follow all those great things, whatever platform you're following us on, and reach out to us if you ever have any questions or need a good wedding videography team. I think we know one. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to the next episode.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Before You Say I Do podcast. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow our YouTube channel and podcast platforms.